Hi, my name is Kavous Salehzadeh Niksirat from the Max Planck Institute for Security and Privacy. Today, I will be presenting our paper addressing the digital address book's interdependent privacy issues. I did this work together with my colleagues from the University of Lausanne, University of Zurich, and Maastricht University. Let me start with the concept of interdependent privacy. This refers to situations where one person's privacy can be affected by the action of others. In other words, even if I'm careful about my data, someone else's behavior, like sharing, uploading, or tagging, can still compromise my privacy. The issue has been studied in areas like online social networks, location sharing apps, and even genomics. In some domains, it's also referred to as bystander privacy, especially in the contexts like voice assistants or smart homes. But one major area where this issue has been surprisingly underexplored is digital address books, also known as phone books or contact apps. I will refer to them as DApps or digital address books from here on. Okay, so we use DApps to store personally identifiable information, PII, about other people, like their names, phone numbers, and email addresses, typically in a structured way. And many of us sync this data with online services like Google or iCloud, or with third-party apps like instant messengers or social networks. What's important here is that this often happens without the knowledge or consent of the people whose data is being stored. And in fact, they might not even realize the information is being uploaded at all. So dApps are a textbook example of interdependent privacy indeed. Beyond these prevalent practices of using dApps by users, dApp service providers can also go further. For example, in this example, they can actively encourage users to add more PII about their contacts. As you see here, Google Contact prompts users to enter their contacts' birthdays. The privacy risk is direct and straightforward. There's no need for complex inference here. dApp data is valuable for profiling, especially for linking or updating profiles. When a contact card contains multiple unique identifiers, it signals that they all belong to the same natural person. For example, a profile tied to someone's phone number could be linked to another one associated with their email addresses, or even with their old and new phone numbers. And this could be connected to keep the profile up to date. This figure here gives a simplified overview of the dApp ecosystem. Here, Alice is the dApp a dApp user who stores personal information about others like John on her phone. And this data is often synced with service providers like Google or Apple and may be accessed by third-party apps like WhatsApp through permissioned APIs. So John, the contact, doesn't need to be a user himself. His data may be shared without his knowledge or consent. So if you are interested in the technical details, including encryption practices and the full threat model, please refer to the paper. Okay, so our study is guided by three main research questions. First, we wanted to understand how people actually use their dApps, what kind of data they store, and how complete or detailed their entries are. Second, we looked at how users perceive the privacy risks of storing other people's data. Are they even aware this could be a privacy issue? And do they think others should have any say or rights over their own contact data? And third, we explored what kinds of privacy-preserving solutions users themselves imagine. So to address these research questions, we conducted a user-centered analysis, including two studies, both based on large-scale online surveys. And in total, we gathered responses from over 900 survey respondents. And study 1 rather focused on self-reported practices, but study 2 was more behavioral. Okay, let's start with study 1. So in the first study, we focused on users' self-reported behavior and perceptions. We conducted a large-scale online survey with 463 prolific respondents, and we targeted those who manually manage their contacts using Google Contact or Apple iCloud, as these are two popular services. We also used a between subject design, so the respondents were randomly assigned to answer questions either from perspective of a user or a subject to better understand both sides of this privacy relationship. The survey covered a wide range of aspects. We asked users about their practices, such as how often they use their DAB and how complete their contacts entries are. We then explored whether users grant access to their contact data to third-party apps and how aware they are that DAB service providers might access this data in clear form. Another focus was on their privacy concerns. We asked how worried they are about storing other people's data or having their own data stored by others. We also asked about their privacy preferences. For example, should DAB service providers be required to let people access, delete, or correct their data? And for these questions about privacy rights, we ask each respondents to switch their perspectives, like where these respondents had to imagine being a subject and a user. Finally, we asked them to imagine a dashboard that would allow people to manage their data stored in other people's DAB. And this helped us to capture the ideas for future privacy-preserving interfaces. Okay, let's see what we found. So almost all users reported accessing their DABs through their phones, and about 42% never used a web browser, with really nearly 30% using only a single platform, means their phone. So this suggests that indeed end-to-end encryption should not be a problem, and it would not disrupt most users' workflows. Like the data can be encrypted at rest on the service provider's servers, and only the user has the decryption key. So most service providers, including Apple and Google, unfortunately do not offer such a feature yet. Okay, we found that only over 90% of users had at least one third-party app on their phone with permission to access to their DAB. And even more concerning, a third of them had 10 or more such apps installed. We identified 199 unique third-party apps, and the most common were communication apps like WhatsApp and Gmail, that followed by social networking apps, productivity apps, finance, and travel apps. We also assessed how well respondents understood whether DAB service providers could technically access their contact data. Over 80% of them agreed that providers could access their data in clear form. And this suggests a relatively high level of privacy understanding and awareness among users about the privacy issues of the mainstream DAB services. We also asked them how concerned they were about the different types of information stored in contacts data, and two fields stood out as the most sensitive one, which were address and photo. And there was also a similar trend for both data subjects and users. We asked the respondents whether they believe people should have rights over their personal data stored in someone else's DAB. And overall, they were mostly in favor of granting such rights, so including the ability to prevent, delete, access, or correct the data. And as you can see, around 40 to 48% agreed with such rights. And this can suggest like a broad support for data subjects protections in the DAB context. To wrap up study 1, we asked respondents to imagine a dashboard that would let people access and control personal data stored about them in others' DAB. And we identified 6 main features. One of the most discussed features was edit and delete, that gives people the ability to correct or remove information that others store about them, but they have also like opposite opinions. Like some of the respondents thought users' consent should be required, while others argued that data subjects should have full control. And you can find the rest of the proposed features in the paper. Like, for example, we had ideas regarding visualization, notifications, and transparency. Okay, now let me explain the methodology of study 2, which focused on actual user behavior, not just perceptions, and it's also assessed people's willingness to share their data and the value they assign to it. So again, we recruited users from Prolific. We used a screener survey to find people who actively use Google Contacts to manage their data. This time we focus on Google Contacts because of technical reasons that I will explain in the next slide. In the main survey, respondents were told that the goal was to collect statistics about their contact entries, like, for example, how many included birthdays. They could choose to either grant access to their Google Contacts or manually report on the same data or withdraw from the study entirely. So we also experimented with financial incentives to study whether compensation affects people's willingness to share their contact data. The survey ran in multiple batches of around 120 respondents with different incentive levels each time. And respondents who granted access had their data imported via a tool called DDS with their consent. Basically, using DDS, we then showed them personalized statistics about their data and asked them to explain why they choose to share it. So this was the reason that we use Google Contacts, because we could use APIs with Google Contact that DDS can work with that, basically. So those who choose to respond manually were asked why they didn't feel comfortable granting access, and those who said they would never share their data were asked what makes sharing with services like Google acceptable, but not with researchers. Okay, now let's look at the completeness of the contact data. So on the left, you see the actual data extracted from contact cards. On the right, you see what respondents self-reported. As you can see, fields like first name, phone number, and last name are the most common entries. From the actual data, the median proportion of contact cards that include a birthday is only 3.6%. This is not even visible in the chart, but it means that half of the respondents had a birthday in around 3.6% of their cards. So, but even 3.6% is meaningful here. Doing some back of envelope calculation, because of the interdependent nature of that data, even rarely included fields can still lead to privacy breaches. For example, if there is only a 3.6% chance that one user include your birthday, and you appear, let's say, in the depths of 50 users, there's an 86% chance that the service provider has your birthday. Okay, let's look at people's choice. So without any bonus, about 20% granted access, but only 10% actually followed through with usable data. As we added bonus up to $5, willingness rose slightly, but then plateaued, showing that some people value their data only at a few dollars. And now let's look at why people made these choices. So those who choose to grant access gave 3 main reasons. First, convenience. Of course, many found this DDS method easier and quicker than manually entering their contacts. Second, some mentioned the financial compensation that we paid them. And third, some respondents said they didn't refrain from sharing because they didn't see any privacy issue. Among those who responded manually, privacy was a central theme. Over half simply said, I like to keep my privacy. And among them, some also mentioned interdependent privacy, saying that they were not comfortable sharing information about others. Like one said, I don't want to reveal other people's private contact information without their permission. And finally, among those who withdraw from the study, they mostly mentioned privacy concerns. Okay, now let's look at two final aspects: how much extra compensation respondents wanted, and why some still refuse to grant access to us. Among those who choose to respond manually, roughly 1/3 said they might grant access to their contact data if compensated. And among batches, the median amount requested ranged from $12 to $35. And for those who refuse to share under any condition, we looked into what makes them trust Google, but not researchers. And for this, many cited Google's reputation for privacy and accountability. Like one said, Google has a reputation for safeguarding user information and is a well-known and established company. Others voiced distrust toward researchers. So, for example, one said, because Google is Google, you are a random researcher on the internet. And finally, several saw Google's data access as a necessary evil. For example, one said, it's more or less necessary evil to have functionality and ease of use. Okay, let me close with a few reflections. First, our findings confirm that interdependent privacy risks in dApps are real. Respondents showed moderate concern, especially for data like addresses and photos, while some were sensitive to others' privacy. About a quarter would still share this data for just a few dollars. Second, there's an overlooked group, those who do not use dApp services at all, yet are still affected, and these non-users have no control over how their data is stored or processed. And third, we found that most users share their dApp data with third-party apps. And this access is often justified for functional reasons because, for example, they enable friend recommendations in social networking apps. But such utility-driven justifications can make people overlook the collective privacy harms, which don't arise from any single user, but from the aggregated behavior of many users. Fourth, from a design perspective, the fact that many users access their dApps on a single device creates new opportunities. For example, end-to-end encryption becomes more feasible when multi-device syncing isn't required. And finally, many respondents saw it as reasonable that their contacts might have rights over shared data to view, correct, or restrict how the information is stored. And this opens promising directions for rethinking consent in dApps, but it may also raise tensions between user agency and the rights of data subjects. Thank you so much for your attention.